Hello, this short recording is on court procedures in civil cases and also talks briefly about cases involving juveniles. Please make sure that you're turned to the right page in your resource book and we'll get started. So, this is all about how the judicial system determines who is at fault in civil cases and in the juvenile justice system. As you may remember, in a criminal case, the jury has to find that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, it's different. In this case, the jury is looking for who is at fault, who is mostly responsible. Does most of the evidence point towards the plaintiff, or does most of the evidence point towards the defendant? It's definitely less strict for the jury than in a criminal case. So let's start off. In a civil case, the first step is that the plaintiff files a complaint against a defendant to recover damages or receive compensation, usually money. A good way to remember that the plaintiff is the one starting things is I usually like to think of the plaintiff as the complaintiff. They have a complaint. They're bringing that complaint. So you have plaintiff and files a complaint against the defendant for whatever reason, and usually they want to receive money in return. Money either for damages or to replace maybe something that was accidentally destroyed, who knows. The second step in a civil case after the complaint has been filed is that a judge or a jury may decide the case. Everyone has the right to a jury trial. However, sometimes they may only want to have a judge decide it. When the judge is deciding it, it's usually in what we call the small claims court. So let's make sure that we add that. If a judge decides, it's usually in the small claims court. The small claims court is exactly what it sounds like. It's when someone is suing someone else for a small amount of money, and usually it's not worth the time of the judicial system or the expense of having a jury trial. If it's a more serious civil case, then usually a jury will get involved. And that leads us to the third step in the civil case. The case can be appealed by either side to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. In a criminal case, if someone's found innocent, the case stops. Nothing else can happen. In a civil case, if they rule in favor of the defendant, the plaintiff can still appeal, and the defendant can appeal if it's ruled in favor of the plaintiff. Either side can appeal in a civil case. That's one major difference between the two. Now, in addition on this worksheet to talking about civil cases and the procedure, we're going to talk about cases involving juveniles. A juvenile is someone who is under 18, someone who is not an adult. And what we're going to do is we're just going to have 2 bullet points in cases involving juveniles. The first bullet point is that judges have greater freedom in handling juvenile cases. You might see the word latitude used, where judges have greater latitude in handling juvenile cases. This means that the judge has more freedom in terms of maybe keeping the trial private, whether it be how much access he wants to, or rather, how much of a punishment he wants to give out. The judge will oftentimes, instead of having to strictly follow precedent, the judge will instead decide that looking at the family background and the individual's history, he's going to give a different sentence than he might in another case. There's a lot more of trying to make sure that the sentence fits the individual rather than having the sentence just fit the crime. The goal of the juvenile system is to rehabilitate or reform the individual, to try and get the juvenile to be a productive member of society by the time they become an adult. This is unlike the adult criminal and civil system, where the goal is more punishment for wrongdoing. Finally, the second bullet point we need for cases involving juveniles is that juveniles who commit serious crimes can be tried as adults. So even though someone might be 16 or 17, if they've committed a serious crime, or maybe if they're functioning as an adult, maybe somebody has a job, they own their own car, maybe they graduated from high school early and they're not yet 18. If they're functioning as an adult, or if they have committed a serious crime, they can definitely be tried as an adult. So that's the court procedures in civil cases and cases involving juveniles. Thanks for listening.